Welcome to the MontCAS Test Security and Data Integrity video series. The purpose of this video is to provide the viewer with some commonly used terms and definitions in test security and data integrity. We recognize that this set of commonly used terms and definitions cannot be exhaustive, but we feel understanding these terms is imperative to fully understanding what test security means and why it is important for all schools to implement with fidelity. You can explore these terms and others under the MontCAS Test Security Portal Glossary. What is assessment? It is the gathering, organizing, and evaluating information about student learning in order to monitor and measure student attainment of a specific set of content standards and the effectiveness of the instructional program. A standardized test like the state summative test is an assessment tool that has a sameness to it for all who take it, in terms of the items presented, the procedures used to administer it, and the methods used to score it. Unless all conditions are the same when different groups are given the test on different occasions, it is not meaningful to compare their scores or to combine their scores to describe overall group performance. Test administration for statewide testing is a range of activities involved from receiving access, to handling materials, to the return of secured assessment materials to the OPI or its agents. Test security specifically means maintaining standardized testing procedures to protect the integrity of the assessment and to assure that results are meaningful and accurate. Just as we learned in the last slide, standardized means having sameness for person to person, place to place, etc. Standard conditions also are essential for comparing groups or schools or data across time. Thus, integrity is the quality of upholding strong standards, and security is the act of protecting or safeguarding assessments or data from assessments. Not adhering to standardized test procedures and protocols as defined in the MontCAS Test Security Manual may lead to a testing incident. The purpose of test security is to preserve the integrity of the assessment, which in order to have integrity and security, stakeholders involved in the test administration process must also adhere to strict confidentiality practices and keep all secure materials secure. The OPI has strict policies on both. Let's continue on with definitions used for interpreting assessment scores. Reliability refers to the extent in which assessments are consistent and measure with great confidence the same things for valid interpretations of student performance from one child to another and over time. Validity refers to the accuracy of the assessment, whether or not it measures what it is supposed to measure for appropriate inferences about students' characteristics, usually based on observations of the student's performance, such as a test score. Notice with this graphic, you can have valid scores but not reliable, or you can have reliable scores but not valid. In order to have both, we require the third term, fidelity. To support reliable and valid interpretations, all tests must be administered with fidelity. Exactness with test administration will result in the bottom right graphic, reliable and valid test scores. Inferences are claims we wish to make about students' knowledge, skills, and abilities. Inference means a conclusion reached on the basis of evidence and reasoning. For all test scores, we want to have confidence in the data or information we have about the student before making any claims about student performance. There are several standard facets of test administration that, if not executed properly, can lead to testing incidences or bias or distortion for the interpretations that can be made about test scores. One example of the facets of test administration is accommodations. Accommodation means changes in procedures or materials that increase equitable access during assessment and generate valid results for students for whom there is documentation of need on an IEP, 504, or EL plan. They allow these students to show what they know and can do. Test administrators must be trained in the accommodation guidelines for each test in order to prevent testing incidences related to the misadministration of student accommodations. Failure to comply with the accommodation guidelines must be reported as a testing incident. Why is participation important? Participation is one key indicator of student success within the Montana State Accountability System, and high participation rates are essential for meaningful and accurate school score reports. Strong participation rates ensure accurate and reliable test scores, which educators, students, parents, school boards, legislators, researchers, and the public use for informing academic instruction. What participation is required? Participation is necessary in order to ensure the data are representative and reflective of the population. When participation rates fall below the state and federal requirements, bias can be introduced into the student knowledge and abilities estimates, thus reducing the overall confidence we have in the data and ultimately interfering with the inferences that can be made about the data. Intentional or unintentionally misusing accommodations or not including all students to the fullest extent possible by the OPI's policies are considered as fraudulent behaviors. Test fraud is a set of activities that are illegal, inappropriate, or against the rules or standards. Cheating is probably the most common type of test fraud. Misconduct, misbehavior during testing, such as inappropriate proctoring or other violations of standard testing protocol. Through the OPI's Test Incident Tracking System, the OPI will evaluate all instances of test fraud, cheating, and misconduct, and respond accordingly to the degree and severity of the incident. Here are 3 activities the OPI routinely uses to detect testing incidences. An audit or site visit is activity the OPI conducts to ensure local assessments administered by the local educational agency. Monitor is a virtual or face-to-face activity the OPI uses to gather information from the school district to ensure compliance with the test administration and test security requirements. Failure to comply with the administration and security requirements may result in one or more of the following penalties: invalidating test scores for an individual student or for groups of students, placing a school on a monitoring list for future test administrations, prohibiting specific personnel from administering a test in the future, requiring retraining plan for a school or district, up to reporting findings to the Board of Public Education for further action within the limits of its authority. The invalidation of scores is the typical response for deviations from standard, which is the act of omitting test results and student responses from the testing, reporting, and accountability systems for a given testing event for which the student may not retest. This MontCAS Test Security Manual focuses on 3 main integrity themes. However, as this acronym suggests, there are 4 elements. Prevention, following best practices for the test integrity and security aspects to prevent irregularities from occurring. Detection, monitoring, reporting, and working with the OPI when irregularities are found. Resolution, working together to investigate irregularities and resolve issues to ensure valid results for all students. The 4th aspect is inspection. OPI's aim is to place the emphasis on LEAs for the fact-finding and uncovering the root cause. The policy is structured around the local control structure and the MontCAS roles and responsibilities hierarchy. Only when it is warranted will this element involve the SEA within the fact-finding process. Now please take a moment to complete these H5P questions before we move on to the next concepts.